Hello, and today's session is about the IELTS speaking assessment. How do you assess the IELTS speaking section? How do you mark students on the tutor desk or during the mock test sessions? It's about discussing the band descriptors and listening for key information and guiding students on how they can correct themselves and improve themselves. A common problem that we face is that teachers or tutors might refer to students on improving fluency. Now, how do you improve fluency? How do you understand what is fluency? What are the things that you look for when you are listening to a candidate do their speaking task? What mistakes are you looking for? Now, all of this is critical information that you need in hand in order to guide students and mark them appropriately and correctly for the IELTS speaking assessment. This is a very important training session. Please listen carefully. After you have seen this training session, perhaps once or twice, because it's a recorded session, you can have a look at it as many times as you want. I would like to see the notes of all of you from this training session. Along with this video, there would be some additional notes that I'm providing for you to refer to. So let's begin. The first and foremost thing is to understand the band descriptors. What are the band descriptors? The band descriptors are guidelines issued by University of Cambridge ESOL examinations, who is the body that designs this test. The band descriptors for the IELTS speaking describe 4 separate descriptors. The first being fluency and coherence. What do you understand by fluency and coherence? Fluency and coherence is the flow of the language. It's about using discourse markers and cohesive devices. Now, I will describe in detail what are discourse markers, what are cohesive devices, which are those. It's about how students are repeating themselves, and it's about how frequently do they hesitate. So, please write down what I have just explained to you, that the first band descriptor is about fluency and coherence. What are you looking for? You are looking for cohesive and discourse markers, number 1. Number 2, you are calculating how many times the candidate is hesitating. Number 3, you are looking for how many times the candidate is repeating themselves. So these are the 3 things that you are looking for in fluency and coherence. So please make note of that. The second band descriptor is lexical resource. Now, what are lexical resources? Lexical resource is the vocabulary. What kind of vocabulary? Are you looking for hi-fi words? No, you are looking for topic vocabulary. So for example, if there is vocabulary, if the topic is about environment, you're looking for climate change, you're looking for global warming, you're looking for carbon cycle, you're looking for deforestation, you're looking for all of those things. Now, within lexical resources, ask me later, or I will tell you later, about English profile, CIFA words, vocabulary, based on how do you understand what is a 5-band vocabulary? How do you understand what is a 6-band vocabulary? How do you understand what is a 7-band vocabulary? So not just vocabulary, but at what level the vocabulary is being used. So all of those things we will discuss. The third band descriptor is grammatical range and accuracy. So you are looking for how many complex sentences, simple sentences the candidate is using, how frequently they are making grammatical errors. So those are some of the things that you're looking for in grammatical range and accuracy. So basically you're looking for how wide the grammar is. So the wideness of the grammar is very important. Now, how do you understand how wide the grammar is? You understand how wide the grammar is by the use of grammatical tools. So how many adverbs, adjectives, conjunctions, how many parts of speech have been used? So there are 8 parts of speech. So out of those, how they've used those and whether they've used them accurately or not. So that's what grammatical range and accuracy means. The last and important part of speaking assessment is pronunciation. Now, some people confuse pronunciation with American pronunciation or British pronunciation. That is not entirely accurate. IELTS describes that English is spoken in 1,000 ways all over the world. So Indian English pronunciation might be little different than American pronunciation or British pronunciation. So you have to encourage students not to speak in an accent, not to speak in an unnatural speech. So it's very important that the students follow the natural speech, whatever the natural speech might be. So it is perfectly fine if they're using Indian English and Indian forms of pronunciation. That is absolutely permitted and there is no problem in that. Now, of course, we have to teach them the correct pronunciation of words. So as many words as they speak, which requires correction in pronunciation, that's what we need to do at Tutor Desk. So to wrap it up, we've discussed 4 different band descriptors. The first being fluency and coherence. In that, we discussed the amount of hesitation, the amount of repetition, and the flow in which the students speak. So that's what we've discussed in fluency and coherence. We've discussed flow is about using discourse markers and cohesive devices. Now, I will describe later in detail what those are. Then we have discussed about lexical resources. We have discussed about topic vocabulary. And we have to later understand at what level what vocabulary comes in. How do you assess vocabulary? The third thing we have discussed is grammatical range, use of complex devices, complex sentences, use of simple devices, simple sentences, and whether those are being used accurately or not by the candidate during the speaking. The fourth, we have discussed about pronunciation. And remember, as I mentioned, it is not important to use American or British English. What is important is that candidates speak naturally and as correctly as possible and use Indian pronunciation or global pronunciation. How do you assess those pronunciation? We will discuss. So those are the 4 things. Now let's go back to use of cohesive and devices and discourse markers. What are those? So in total, there are 9 discourse markers. So now let us discuss about some of the cohesive markers and cohesive devices and discourse markers. So it's quite easy to understand. So there are 9 essential discourse markers and cohesive devices. So those 9, I've made an acronym and you can remember using that. So it's ACCESS, ACCESS. And then you can remember another word that is QICE, QICE access. So the access markers are adding, A for adding, C for comparing, CE for cause and effect. So that's ACCE, and then you are left with SS, which is sequencing and summary. Now QICE, which are the last four that you ought to remember, are qualifying, illustrating, contrasting, and emphasizing access markers, discourse markers. So let's start. Adding, understanding adding discourse marker. So adding is and, as well as, moreover, furthermore, in addition to, on top of that. Another point is, now these are adding markers. Comparing, similarly, likewise, as with, like, equally, in the same way. These are comparing discourse markers. Cause and effect, because of, as a result of, consequently, therefore, thus, owing to, due to. These are all cause and effect discourse markers. Sequencing, first, firstly, first of all, second, secondly, second of all, third, next, meanwhile, now, subsequently. These are all sequencing markers. And last of the access markers, which is summary. In short, on the whole, in other words, on the whole, overall, generally, in general, in brief. These are all summary markers. And then the next acronym, which is QICE. Q for qualifying. But, however, although, unless, apart from, as long as, if. These are all qualifying markers. Illustrating, for example, such as, for instance, in case of, as shown above, illustrated by, take, one example of. These are all illustrating markers. Contrasting. What are contrasting markers? Very interesting. Whereas, alternatively, unlike, on the other hand, conversely, having said that, nevertheless, however. Now these are all contrasting markers. And last of QICE, which is very important, is emphasizing marker. Above all, in particular, especially, significantly, indeed, notably. These are all emphasizing markers. So in brief, we have looked at 9 discourse markers or cohesive devices. Once again, 2 acronyms to remember: access, which is ACCESS, and QICE, QUICE. So access, A for adding, C for comparing, C for cause, E for effect, sequencing for S, and summary for S, ACCESS, and QICE, qualifying, illustrating, contrasting, and emphasizing. Now, using these 9 cohesive devices and discourse markers, students can get very high band scores in the IELTS speaking test. So now that we have discussed the cohesive devices and discourse markers, the 9 of them, we will now discuss a new system at the tutor desk for assessing the speaking tasks. So the new system is, each student will maintain his own, her own notebook in which they will write down, before coming to you, a table. Now I'm sharing photos of those tables. Now those tables have been given to me by the Cambridge ESOL department. Now this is official assessment table. So for example, now you must open the picture that I have sent you along with this video for the table. The first table is for fluency and coherence. Now in the fluency and coherence table, they will write down the first question. Are the answers of an appropriate length of the task? Now in that, there will be two columns, good and not so good. Now in each column, whether it is good or not so good, you will write down your notes and give to the student. The second question is, does the speaker speak too slowly, hesitate, repeat, or make corrections? Now again in that, there will be two columns, good and not so good, and you will write your notes in that and give to the student. The third question for assessing fluency and coherence is, does the speaker use a range of cohesive devices and discourse markers? Again in that, there are two columns, good and not so good, and you will write down what they are supposed to use. So you will make notes and give to the student. This is only for one band descriptor, which is fluency and coherence. For second band descriptor, lexical resource, again you will mention 3 questions. The student's notebook will have 3 questions in it. Before they come to you, they will write down those 3 questions, or when they are at the tutor desk, you will help them write those 3 questions and make notes in their notebook. On top of that, you will write your name, the time, and the date. So the student can refer to the improvements they are making on a day-to-day basis. So imagine them maintaining a notebook for every time they are doing a speaking session with a tutor. I'm sorry, the car's a little bouncy, so but I'm trying to complete this training session for you, for all of us, so we can mark the speaking assessment correctly. So going on, for second band descriptor is lexical resources. In that, again, you will ask them to write 3 questions. The first is, does the speaker use a range of vocabulary? Everyday vocabulary do they use? Do they use less common vocabulary, or do they use colloquial expressions? What are colloquial expressions? They are local language expressions. So words like bungalow, words like lakhs of rupees. So these are all colloquial expressions, local English. Now that's not wrong English, it's called colloquial expressions. So a good example of colloquial expression is, as I mentioned, bungalow. Australians use the word bloke. Americans use the word dude. So all of those are colloquial expressions. They're not necessarily wrong expressions. It is also sometimes colloquial expressions are confused with slang, but it is appropriately used English. So again, in that, you will write down good, not so good, and you will mention your notes. The second question is, does the speaker use vocabulary appropriately? Are they using the correct verb form? That is very important. Are they using the correct collocation? So that's very important. Again, in that, you will write down good and not so good. Those who don't know what collocation is, please look it up. This is homework for you. Is the speaker able to participate? Now that's the third question. So is the speaker able to paraphrase and participate in the conversation? So it's very important for the speaker to paraphrase. So what is paraphrasing? It's basically saying the same sentence in your own words, so without changing the meaning of the sentence. So is the candidate able to paraphrase in order to participate in the conversation appropriately? Again, in that, you will write down good and not so good. So this is for the second band descriptor. The third band descriptor is grammatical range and accuracy. Now I'm sharing all of these official IELTS questions with you, which are used by examiners for assessing the speaking task. So the third is grammatical range and accuracy. In that you will write down, does the speaker use simple grammatical forms with control? Good, not so good. Second, does the speaker use complex structures and are they used accurately? Good and not so good. Again, you will write your notes in that. The fourth is, of course, pronunciation. Can the speaker be generally understood? That's the first question. So, although the speaker is making mistakes, but can you understand the speaker? So, good and not so good. Are individual sounds clear? Are they correctly produced? So, you will discuss about whether the S sound and the T sound and the L sound, all of the phonetical sounds that are associated with alphabets and words are spoken clearly or not. So whether the speech is coming out in a clear way or not, that is understood. So again, in that you will write down good and not so good. The third question is, does the speaker use word stress? So word stress and sentence stress correctly, what we often refer to as intonation. So English teachers always talk like this, right? They always keep doing this. So it is very important that you understand the meaning of what I am saying. So intonation, hills and troughs. So that is very important that you teach correct word stress and correct sentence stress. So that is what intonation is. So you have to write down again good and not so good. And then you have to write down notes and give to the student in their own notebook. The fourth is, of course, again, after stress, whether the flow, the intonation, spoke that. So the intonation is the last part, which is the speaker's intonation appropriate or not? So what do you mean by appropriate? Whether the intonation is not going in the wrong direction. So whether the intonation is not going in the wrong direction. So you can see the meaning or the emphasis of the sentence changes if I stress some of the words that are not to be stressed and not stress the words that are to be stressed. So it's very important to use correct intonation. So those are the sheets that I'm sharing with you. So please understand clearly. So first, every student will maintain his or her notebook for speaking. In that notebook, every time they come to the tutor desk, these 4 band descriptors with their respective 4 questions each, except one band descriptor in which there were 3 questions. So a total of 4 plus 4 plus 4, which is 12, and then 3. So 15 questions are there across 4 band descriptors with good and not so good, and your notes are written. So every time they see the speaking assessment, they know that they made a mistake yesterday, but today they have improved. So imagine how much improvement they will be able to make because they know exactly where they are going wrong. So that is to be maintained. So this is the new system that we are to follow from today onwards. Thank you. Please discuss with supervisors. Please discuss with your senior teachers and get this started.